If you're like me, you probably had an image of sherry as that super sweet aperitif that your grandma and spinster aunts used to drink during family holiday gatherings. You remember Harvey's Bristol cream, right? Well, this trip to Jerez de la Frontera, the home of sherry wine, certainly opened my eyes. There are actually a range of sherries, from very dry to very sweet, and they are astonishingly complex and distinctive. In this next section, we're going to take, well, a deep dive into the world of sherry. We'll visit 4 different sherry wine cellars called bodegas, from small boutique operations to larger international brands. We'll tour a huge cooperage where they make sherry barrels from scratch, and we'll take a sunset tour of the vineyards. We'll examine centuries-old archives detailing the history of the wine, sample dozens of sherries, and according to one of my hosts, find the key to universal love and world peace.
Love. Lot of love. Most important than cheers. Love always.
That's coming up next, so stick around. And I hope you're thirsty. Perhaps the most unusual of the boutique sherry bodegas is the Bodega Tradicion. Founded in 1650, it is the only bodega in Jerez that specializes in VOS, very old sherry, which is at least 20 years old, and VORS, very old rare sherry, which is certified to be at least 30 years old. The motto of the bodega is wine, art, and history, and it takes each of those aspects seriously. It houses a gallery with more than 300 pieces of Spanish art from the 14th to the 19th centuries that includes such masters as Goya, Velázquez, Murillo, and El Greco. It even has a small collection of Picasso's earliest works from when he was a teenager. But now it was time for the wine part of our education. For a wine to even be called a sherry, there are some very strict rules. It has to be grown, aged, and bottled within the so-called sherry triangle.
In the past, to call something sherry, it had to be aged and bottled in Jerez, Sanlúcar, or El Puerto. All of that combined is a little bit less than 7,000 hectares of vineyards to produce sherry. So the majority, if you want to go see some vineyards, you're gonna around the triangle, you're gonna find a lot. It's very, very easy access.
A few years ago, to deal with the growing demand, the strict boundaries of the sherry triangle were loosened up a bit to include more of the surrounding countryside. One thing you notice driving around the triangle is the very chalky soil, called albariza, in which the vines are planted. Turns out, it's ideally suited for growing grapes in sparse rainfall conditions.
This is what we call albariza. So if you want to feel it, it's very light, it's very porous. So it was formed over millions of years. It's going to be absorbing the rainwater during fall and winter. And then in summer, as it gets here very, very hot, the upper layer is going to form kind of a crust, we can say. And it keeps that water from evaporating. Very important because we are not allowed to irrigate the vines. We just use the water that we get. And it gives the wine the grape specific profile. What you can see is the name of the 3 grape varieties that we can use to produce sherry. Even though Palomino is the queen of the region, over 95% of the vineyards that are planted here for sherry are Palomino, so almost all of them. And Pedro Jimenez and Moscatel, as we harvest them, with them sun dry in the soil of the vineyard, so they become almost raisins. And that's why, I don't know if you've tried them, but you can find sherries are very dark in color, very dense, and very, very sweet, because we've produced them with those 2 grapes.
We took a break so that the Venenciador could collect samples of different sherries with a unique instrument, the Venencia, designed to grab sherry samples from the barrel without disturbing the yeast layers or any other part of the wine. Then Agatha continued.
Talking about how we produce the different styles of sherry. And the Amontillado, I think, is a perfect example for you to see the evolution of sherry. Because, for example, the first glass that we have is what we call fino. This is a Fino that is deeper in color than usual because we have a older style of Fino. But Fino, as we're saying, ages under the veil of yeast. So that's why it's paler in color and it's gonna be very dry. But then once the Fino loses their yeast, it's gonna transform into an amontillado. And then you can see how this is the same wine, but in different ages. So this is what we call a Fino. This is a Fino that has had a few years of oxidative aging, and then it has been getting darker and darker until we get to the amontillado that we sell.
This is truly a boutique operation. Even the labels are applied by hand, one bottle at a time. So we've learned a lot about the art, and we've learned about the wine. But what about the history, the third part of the bodega's motto? That's when Agatha took us to a special room to meet the archivist of Bodegas Tradicion, Manuel Marin.
This archive is the oldest of its kind, dating back to 1650 and providing an uninterrupted record of a wine that has been produced in the city for nearly 4 centuries. It has documented much more than just the trade of Jerez wine. A wine so important that it was exported to the 2 great empires of the time, the British Empire and the French Empire. We are talking about centuries of writings that include more than just business matters. They recount family events, societal changes, wars, pandemics, weather patterns, pirate attacks, ship voyages, thefts, the destination of goods, interactions with royal houses, and the lives of the humbler people in the area. Therefore, these are more than just trade records. These anthropological records recount nearly 4 centuries of world history and its evolution through the world of wine. As is true everywhere else in the world, if you trace the development of a region's winemaking tradition, you'll uncover the history of that place itself.
As the visit drew to a close, Agatha treated us to one of their best finos.
This is for you.
Salud.
Salud, salud, gracias, 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 salud. And I got to show off a little of my newfound sherry knowledge.
This is round, very
very
smooth.
round, very long finish. Yeah.
So fine.
This one is definitely dangerous.
Founded in 1896, Bodega Lustau began as a small almacenista, which is an independent aging house supplying wines to larger sherry producers. We followed our host on what felt like a trip back through time as he led us through labyrinths of barrels to his office, strategically overlooking the entire operation.
Well, my name is Juan Mateos Arizon, and I am the person responsible for Lustau in wine experience department and PR. Lustau is a medium-sized winery. It's not big. We have a long portfolio with more than 48 different brands in the market, but we are not big. We are medium-sized. We are selling about 600,000 bottles per year, but we are very specialized in sherry. This region for wine is the oldest region who produce wines from Europe. We're talking about more than 3,000 years when the Phoenicians produced wine in the region. Between El Puerto de Santa Maria and Jerez, we 20 years ago discovered remains of Phoenicians, and we discovered the oldest winery in the region.
Today, Lustau is the only bodega to produce wine from vineyards located in all 3 areas of the Sherry Triangle. And although all sherry is fortified with extra alcohol, this was done to help it survive long sea journeys to France, Britain, and the Americas, it is considered a wine and not an aperitif or a liqueur.
Sherry is not an aperitif. Sherry is a wine, and you can play a completely meal with first, second, and dessert with sherry. and it's fantastic. It's my recommendation. It's very important to discover the dry wines, because the people in Jerez who dedicate their life to sherry, they usually drink dry.
It was time to leave the office and start exploring the bodega. And Juan was like a man on a mission. There's a reason that a lot of these old bodegas look more like cathedrals than wine cellars. Sherry needs moderate, stable temperatures and high humidity to thrive. But in a place like Andalucia, where summer temperatures can easily soar to over 40 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit, that's no small order. High ceilings are a key element in keeping temperatures low. The huge volume of air takes longer to warm, and the height lets the hot air rise well above the barrels. When the hot air rises, it's evacuated through small, high-placed windows, which act as chimneys. Thick, uninsulated walls, some over 2 feet or 60 centimeters in width, are another key element. But why the dirt floors?
We planted the barrels on the sun. This sun is the same that we use for bull rings, okay? And we spray water on the floor to keep the humidity that we need for keep the wine, okay? We don't have air conditioner or heaters machines in the wineries in Jerez, because we are very close to the Atlantic Ocean, and we receive during the night a very fresh, refreshed from the coast, okay? And what we want to do is to keep natural conditions during the whole process of the wine. Okay.
Juan has bottles of different types of sherry strategically stashed around the bodegas to use as educational aids.
Do you want to try something?
Why not?
Yeah, come on. A spectacular fino from El Puerto.
This would go good with oysters, huh?
Yeah, fantastic, amazing.
Yeah.
Because the alkalinity of the oysters with the alkalinity of that wine is spectacular. One of the best pairings.
This comes in handy when he explains how dry sherries, like manzanilla and fino, are aged under a layer of yeast called flor. You may need a chemistry degree to understand the process, but fortunately, not to enjoy the wine itself.
Look at that. This is an amazing mystery of Jerez, that is the cover of the yeast. If you can film from here, you can see that it's a natural protection.
This naturally occurring layer of yeast protects the wine from oxidation and results in the dry finos and manzanillas.
And that is the reason when you drink a fino or manzanilla, when you taste, you appreciate remembers of bakery, croissant, bread, because the influence of the yeast.
Wow.
A spectacular fino, but fino is wonderful. It's like a white wine, the best white wine that you can ever drink.
But the magical yeast layer known as flor is not the only mystery as to how sherry is created. The blending process is equally arcane. The reason you rarely see sherry sold by a vintage year is that it has a rather unique and complex form of blending called the solera system.
And we never empty barrels, okay? We have the process of soleras and criaderas. That we do is to move the wine. We extract from the solera from different levels. At the same time, we send to a next tank and we blend and homogenize.
Barrels in a solera are arranged in different groups or tiers called criaderas, or nurseries. Each level contains wine of the same age. The oldest level, at the bottom, holds the wine ready to be bottled. It will be replaced with the same amount of wine from the first criadera, the one slightly younger and typically less complex. This, in turn, will be filled up with wine from the second criadera, and so on. The last criadera, which holds the youngest wine, is topped up with the wine from the latest harvest. We continued from stash to stash, and by the time we were wrapping up the visit, we had tasted no fewer than 7 very special sherries, and according to my pedometer, covered almost a mile and a half of walking through the Lustau bodegas, all the while receiving more tips about sherry drinking from Juan, like try pairing spicy food or artichokes with Amontillado, always use large wine glasses, and serve sherry chilled. And if you're cooking with sherry,
when you are cooking, drink it, sherry, because it's the most important thing. Drink it. Yeah. Take a glass, Peggy.
Gracias.
You're welcome. Love. Lot of love. Most important than cheers.
And back in his office, Juan left us with perhaps his most important bit of sherry advice.
If the world drink more sherry, the world have less problems and the people will be more happy.
I couldn't agree more. The next morning, we went on tours in two of the larger bodegas in town. González Bayas, more commonly recognized by its flagship brand Tio Pepe, is one of the most renowned sherry producers in the world. Founded in 1835 by Manuel Maria González, the company began as a small venture in the heart of Jerez. It flourished thanks to González's keen business sense and the synergy with his English partner, Robert Blake Bayas, leading to the international expansion of Jerez's famous fortified wines. Tio Pepe, named after Manuel Maria González's uncle and mentor, became synonymous with Fino sherry. Over the decades, Tio Pepe not only became a global ambassador for sherry, but also an enduring cultural icon in Spain. The brand's signature bottle, dressed in a red jacket and wide-brimmed Andalusian hat, remains one of the most recognizable symbols of Spanish wine. Over the years, numerous celebrities, politicians, and artists have left their mark on Tio Pepe bodegas. The tradition of celebrities and dignitaries signing a González Bayas barrel continues, and visitors to the bodegas can see these iconic signatures firsthand, adding yet another layer of mystique to the legendary Tio Pepe name. Founded in 1730, Fundador is the oldest and one of the largest sherry bodegas in Jerez. The bodega's legacy took a defining turn in 1874 when Pedro Domecq, part of the legendary Domecq winemaking family, introduced Fundador, Spain's first ever brandy, further solidifying the bodega's prestige. Today, Fundador boasts extensive soleras and vast cellars, housing thousands of barrels of aging sherry and brandy. It's also the home of the famous Harvey's Bristol Cream Sherry, the brand that exploded the popularity of sherry in the 1960s and 70s. Its biggest bodega is called La Mezquita because of its resemblance to the famed mosque cathedral of the same name in Cordoba. At 11,000 square meters, it is one of the largest in the region. The bodega has maintained its reputation for producing high-quality sherries, from dry finos to rich olorosos and Pedro Jimenez styles. This afternoon, we're heading for a drive around the vineyards of the Sherry Triangle with our friends Salvatore and Silvia. But our first stop is at Antonio Paez Lobato Cooperage to see how barrels are made. Our guide is a young lady named Almu, and she explains the different needs of sherry producers and whiskey producers.
For the sherry wine, they always used American oak. But for us, our market is for whiskey, and for the whiskey, clients prefer European oak.
Sherry cellars tend to recycle their barrels for decades, sometimes hundreds of years, because the older wood is more conducive to sherry's flavors. Most of the work here for local sherry bodegas is the repair and refurbishment of old barrels. But the whiskey distilleries all over the world, who can only use a barrel once or twice, are the cooperage's biggest clients. And these whiskey makers, especially in Scotland, like to get their barrels made here because they prefer sherry seasoned barrels, Due to the rich and complex flavors they impart, this cooperage has its own in-house bodega, so they can pre-soak the barrels in the sherry for their whiskey clients. Depending on what whiskey will be stored in them, the barrels are either lightly toasted for Scotch whiskies or more heavily charred, which is preferred by bourbon makers. The company is very proud of the quality of its largely handmade barrels and traditional skills of its master coopers. But they're not averse to using cutting-edge technology when warranted, like this laser engraver. They used to use a branding iron to apply their trademark to the barrels. Now they just let the robot lasers do it. We had a beautiful afternoon for our vineyard tour. Salvatore explains how the vines are pruned and the ground fashioned into treads to make the most of the sparse rains. The Castillo de Marcanuda, located in Mahuela Vineyard, was once an important strategic enclave during the Middle Ages, and nowadays is an event space and a seasonal winery owned by Bodegas Fundador. The vineyard and winery here has belonged to the Domecq family since 1732, and these days is a favorite spot for locals to enjoy a sunset. And, of course, a glass of sherry.